There is a question that grief plants deep inside every person who has ever stood at a graveside and watched the earth close over someone they loved. Where are they now? Not as a theological abstraction, not as a doctrine to be recited, but as a real and urgent cry from the heart of someone who misses a specific face, a specific voice, a specific presence that will not be walking through the door again. If that question lives in you right now, stay with me, because what you are about to hear has brought genuine comfort to millions of people across centuries of Christian faith, and it may be exactly what your soul has been waiting to receive. The loss of someone we love is unlike any other pain. It does not behave like other wounds. It does not follow a predictable timeline. It does not respond to the things that usually make hard things easier, like time, like distraction, like keeping busy. Grief has a way of finding you in the most ordinary moments. The quiet Tuesday afternoon, when you reach for your phone to share something funny, and then remember. The empty chair at Thanksgiving, the birthday that comes and goes, and the world acts like it is just another day. And underneath all of it, that same question, the one that faith is uniquely equipped to answer. Where are they? Did they make it? Are they okay? Here is what the Christian tradition, and in particular the witness of the saints, has to say about that question, and it is far more concrete and far more comforting than most people realize. Saints like Padre Pio of Pietrelcina, one of the most documented mystical figures of the 20th century, did not speak about the afterlife in vague poetic terms. He spoke about it the way you speak about something you have actually seen. Throughout his decades of ministry in San Giovanni Rotondo, Padre Pio received visits, as his fellow friars and spiritual directees testified consistently, from souls who came to request prayers or to give thanks for having finally entered into the fullness of God's glory. These were not the stuff of legend or exaggeration. They were documented, repeated, consistent experiences that the Church has examined with great seriousness. What they tell us is something that grief desperately needs to hear. Heaven is real. The souls of those who have died in God's grace are not gone. They are alive in a dimension of existence that our language barely has words for, and they are not indifferent to us. One of the most significant signs that a loved one's soul has found its way into the light, according to these mystical traditions the Church has affirmed over centuries, is something you may have already experienced, without knowing what to call it. It is that inexplicable wave of peace that sometimes breaks over you in the middle of your grief, often after a period of intense prayer, often at a moment when you were not expecting it at all. Not the numbness that comes from exhaustion, not the temporary relief of distraction. Something different, something quieter and deeper. A peace that feels like it is coming from outside you, rather than rising up within you, that seems to say, without words, it is okay. They are okay. That shift in your interior atmosphere, according to the tradition Padre Pio embodied and taught, can be understood as a sign that the weight carried by a soul in its process of purification has been lightened by divine mercy, and that your prayers have been received and are doing real work on the other side of the veil. Saint Faustina Kowalska, the Polish mystic whose visions of divine mercy transformed Catholic devotion in the 20th century, and whose canonization by St. John Paul II brought her message to the entire world, left us extraordinary descriptions of the state of souls after death. What she wrote in her diary, which the Church has examined and approved, gives us a picture of the afterlife that is not frightening but luminous, not remote but intimately connected to our daily life of prayer. Among the things she described were the ways in which souls sometimes communicate their condition to those who loved them, not through dramatic supernatural events that leave you questioning your own sanity, but through something much gentler, a dream that carries a completely different quality than ordinary dreams, one that leaves you not anxious or confused, but deeply, almost inexplicably serene. A sense of joy so specific and so out of proportion to your circumstances that it cannot be explained by anything happening around you. Faustina understood these moments not as products of wishful thinking or psychological self-comfort, but as genuine touches of heaven, moments permitted by God, to let the people left behind know that the suffering of their loved one has ended, and that they now exist in a light that does not fade. Now here is something that does not require mystical visions to recognize, because it shows up in ordinary life all the time if you know what you are looking for. The Church has always pointed to certain movements within the soul of the grieving person as signs worth paying attention to. A sudden, unprompted desire to pray for someone who has already died. Not because you were reminded of them by something external, but because the impulse simply arose, insistent and clear. A moment in which a specific virtue of the person who passed, their patience, their generosity, their quiet courage, comes to mind not as a memory that saddens you, but as a call to action, a challenge to embody something they modeled. These interior movements are not accidents, they are invitations. When the spiritual presence of a loved one consistently orients you toward God rather than away from Him, when thinking of them makes you want to be better rather than simply sadder, the tradition of the Church suggests that this soul is actively interceding for you before the Father. They have not retired from love. They have simply taken it to a higher altitude, where it operates with a power and a precision that was not available to them, while they were still bound by a body and time. There is something else worth sitting with, and it has to do with the honest limits of what we can know. We do not have all the answers. The Church does not claim to know the condition of any particular soul with certainty, and that intellectual humility is actually a gift, rather than a disappointment, because it creates space for the most important posture a grieving person can take: trust. Trusting the promise of Christ, not as a platitude, but as a load-bearing beam. When Jesus stood at the tomb of Lazarus and said, "I am the resurrection and the life," He was not offering a metaphor. He was making a claim about the actual structure of reality. A claim he backed up 4 days later by walking out of his own tomb. That same authority stands behind every prayer you offer for the person you have lost. The Mass offered for the repose of a soul is not a ritual gesture. According to the constant teaching of the Church, it is the most powerful act of intercession available to human beings, the sacrifice of Christ Himself made present and applied to a specific soul by the intention of those who request it. The Rosary of the Holy Souls carries that same weight of intercessory love, directed precisely toward those who are in the process of being made fully ready for the presence of God. You may not receive a dramatic vision. You may not have a dream that removes all doubt. You may spend long seasons of grief in which the silence feels absolute, and the assurances of faith feel like words rather than experience. That is not failure, and it is not a sign that your prayers are going unheard. It is the terrain of faith, the same terrain navigated by every saint who ever lived, including the ones who wept and questioned and sat in darkness before the light returned. Keep praying. Not because prayer is a transaction that guarantees specific outcomes, but because prayer is the thread that holds you connected to the one you love across the only boundary that has ever tried to sever that connection. Death cannot break what Christ has joined. The resurrection is not a distant event on a theological timeline. It is a promise with your name on it and the name of the person you are missing. And it means that the goodbye you said was not the last word. The last word belongs to the One who has already spoken it, and the word is life. If this message reached something real in you today, share it with someone who is carrying grief and has not yet found a way to speak about it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for a person in pain is simply put the right words in front of them at the right time. Subscribe to Living Hope And turn on notifications so you never miss content like this. Leave a comment below with the name of someone you are praying for today. We read every one, and we pray with you. Because that is what this community is for, to hold each other in the hope that does not disappoint, all the way to the reunion that is coming.